Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 80 in the book of Genesis. Great thought today. And we're going to talk about cutting a covenant, because that's what God is going to do with Abraham and, in a sense, also with us. So don't hold that too far at arm's length. And here's the big point today, is that when God cuts this covenant with Abraham, with blood and sacrifice and death, he knows what it's going to cost him. When God cuts a covenant, he knows that he's cutting himself. So we're in the book of Genesis. We're walking through it 1 7-minute little thought segment at a time, little truths, and keep coming back to tomorrow with these little faithful expositions and faithful exposures. Why? So you kind of like stumble across diamonds. We're in chapter 15, and God is joining a relationship with Abraham. The big verse in chapter 15 is, after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, I'm your shield. Your reward shall be great. And later on, he says, he's making the covenant, he's talking about offspring. And Abram believes the Lord, and it's counted to him as righteousness. So today we're going to talk a little bit further in the depths of chapter 15 now, where God tells Abram, bring a heifer, a goat, a ram, a turtle dove, and a pigeon. Cut the big things in half, the three big things in half, and then he's going to make some more promises. This is Genesis chapter 15, verse 17. When the sun had gone down and it was dark, behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch. So it was dark. We know this because it tells us the sun was down and it was dark. And this smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between the pieces of the cleaved in half heifer, goat, and ram. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring, which he doesn't have any yet, I will give this land, he doesn't have any of that either, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So what a great picture here, a reality where God's presence manifests visually as a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch. So the sun's down, it's dark, and somehow this flaming torch, it must have been very impressive. And maybe that's why everybody loves a campfire and everybody loves a bonfire. God's presence is often associated with fire. Later in Exodus chapter 13, we see that, quite visually, and the Lord goes before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they may travel by day and night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart before the people. So sometimes the Lord goes before his people with fire. And what I want to emphasize today, though, is the drama of this covenant, the violence of this covenant between these two hunks of halves of these bodies. Before we talk about the covenant per se, I want to talk about the land. And this is a vast piece of land. I don't know, it's maybe 10 times bigger than what we call Israel today. But when Solomon reigned, the promise was actually fulfilled. In 1 Kings chapter 4, 21, it says, Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms from the Euphrates, up in the north, that's way up in Iraq, to the land of the Philistines, to the border of Egypt. They brought tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. So 1,000 years from today's passage, this verse came true. So God is faithful to the promise to Abram, as well as to the little Abrams, which is going to tell us that we can also receive this covenant. All right, so what's a covenant? A covenant is a formal thing that binds two parties together in a relationship, and on the basis of personal commitment with the consequences, certain penalties for keeping or breaking the covenant. So when it's a Hebrew term, cutting a covenant, it's saying, if I don't do the promises in this covenant, you can do this to me. So you can kill me. So let's be clear, the penalty of violation of this covenant is kind of life or death. It's keep this promise or else. Keep this. So this penalty, cutting you in half, death, your spilling of your blood, and your life becoming due, is a part of this covenant. So later, theologically, we're going to ask, well, hey, what are you going to do about your sin? And the Lord is going to say, look, I made this covenant with you. I sacrificed for you. So if you break this penalty, who's going to pay your penalty? Who will pay the penalty that is due you? So this is God's unconditional promise that he's going to give you land, yes, and of himself to Abram and the offspring of Abram, which is going to be you and me. So it's God binding himself to his people, for sure. And it's kind of like the gospel in these carcasses. So God knows the future. He knows that the people are going to breach this covenant. He knows that he is going to provide the cut. He is going to be destroyed. He's going to be killed, sacrificed, and have to use his son as a payment to restore this covenant. So someone is going to break fellowship. God is saying, someone's going to break fellowship with me. And maybe that sounds like you and all of us. And the cool thing about this is God turns, even knowing all this, he turns towards mankind. So God had a chance to get out of this dance with humanity way back in the garden, but he turned towards Adam and Eve in the cool of the day. He knew what that commitment was going to cost him. And God had a chance to get out of the people business with the flood, but he turns towards Noah and his family, knowing what it's going to cost. And similarly here, God knows exactly what this commitment to Abram is going to cost. And he knows that it's going to cost, sacrifice and blood and life of his son, and yet he decides to make it. So he knows this. So Abram makes this covenant. He's going to break this. God makes the covenant. He's not going to break this. God is saying, I'm giving you of myself. I'm giving you of the land. I'm giving you of the offspring. It's a very high cost covenant. It's the highest cost to God, because he's going to have to, cut himself in a sense as payment for this. So in conclusion, you should feel valued. This is how much he values being in a relationship with people. You are seen, you are understood, you are pursued. So when God cuts this covenant with Abraham, he knows that he's going to have to cut himself to fulfill it. Thanks for listening.